Hi, afternoon. It's Vaughan Smith in Nova Scotia, westcoatbeltpottery.ca. I am going to show you how to make a slab-built birdhouse, like a Victorian house, basically. And it's going to be a long project, and we'll see how it develops. But there's lots of open-ended, creative ability, suggestions and possibilities with this, so I'd love to see what everybody does. So if anybody makes these after I've done the video, just send me pictures. I'd like to see how they turn out. All right, so the first thing is you've got to roll a slab, and I've shown you this in the last video actually as well, but I'm just going to go to reiterate what I did, because somebody said it was a good sort of hint or suggestion that I did. So I'd like to do it again and make sure that you saw how I did it. Okay, so whatever you start with a slab will determine what you end up with. And so I'm going to try and cut this down directly in the middle, and I can't see the other side obviously, so so just be careful how you do this. Am I staying in the middle? Close. So I'm dividing this slab block of clay into 2 equal parts with this. So I'm going to need some big slabs or many slabs. But what is really important with this is that for the slab roller, you end up with a thinner part down here and a thinner part over here and a thick area there and a thick area there. So that way the roller can actually, am I staying there? Good. Oh, well, I should have a mirror over there so I can see what I'm doing. Okay, so it's basically thick on one side and thin on the other. So getting the sheet of plastic, let's put you down a bit lower now so you can see. Just taking my sweater off. So this is a really big slab. It's about 6 pounds of clay. And what I was showing people to get a square the other day, rather than an oval, what I did was I simply, get you down a little lower again. There we go. Is I'm thinning it in the center by making it thinner in the center. I should end up with a square when I finish rolling, but that means I've got to thicken up the outer edges there so that it's a little higher there than it is over this side. And if you take it to the edge of the table, you can beat it back a little bit with your hand to thicken up that area. Because slab rollers tend to put more pressure down in the center, I think, and so they make the slab becomes an oval, which I've always found is less useful than a square. So that's all you're doing. You're thinning the center, pushing the clay to the outer edges, and then you're beating it back to thicken up that outer edge there. Alright, so I'm putting it down right at the where the roller is, and then pull the blanket over the top. So I have a bottom blanket, a piece of plastic with clay on it, and then a top piece of canvas that goes over the top of the whole thing. So canvas, plastic, clay, canvas. Check your settings. If you have a slab roller, if you have to roll this by hand, then it becomes a bit of a, I showed you in the last video on doing the actual fish, how to roll a slab by hand. But make sure that you actually start, if it's a big slab, with a much thicker piece than you think, because it's easier to roll it a second time than it is to actually wedge it up and start again if you roll it the wrong thickness. So I'm setting mine at almost a 1/2 inch, and I only want a 1/4 inch. So pull it towards the roller and then start rolling. There you go. And then go back. I like to go back a second time because I was told a long time ago that the molecules of clay all get lined and it makes it warp if you just go all in one direction. It's good to turn your clay around. Even when you're doing hand rolled with a rolling pin, it's a good idea to do that, but I feel like it's not as important with that because you're only putting little bits of pressure on all the time. Whereas a slab roller is quite aggressive rolling that slab. Okay, so we've got now a 1/4 inch. So I'm going to start the roll again. It's a little harder now because I'm going to make a much bigger slab of clay as well. And then push it back again. All right. So we did 2 rolls, one at 1/2 inch, and then we thinned it down to a 1/4 inch. And this is what we've ended up with. Pretty much a square. Okay, the birdhouse can be free drawn or you can use templates. I have cut out a lot of here's a tiny little window. This is the side of the birdhouse. It's tall, it's a double-story birdhouse, so you'll need 2 slabs this size, and I've actually got a cross on there to divide it up equally in case I need to use that. Then I have the bottom of the birdhouse. This is going to be the floor here, and then this is going to be another side of the birdhouse here, and then the roof will be folded. And so I need a pretty big slab for the roof. I usually make these too big and then cut them down later. But basically those are the slabs. Dimension wise, this one is a 12-inch square. And you can make these any size, you don't need to copy what I'm doing, but this one is 9 inches by 7 inches, so this is the side panel. This is the base. And this one is 7 inches by 5.5 inches. And this one, it's actually, the bottom of it is 5 inches. And then the top, where I've drawn those lines across there, that is 8 inches. And the height of this is 12 inches. So you can draw your pieces if you want to do it the same as this, or you can make a small version, because this ends up being a very big birdhouse with 2 stories, so you get 2 nests in here. Alrighty, so tomorrow I'll show you how to do all the rest. Okay, the slabs have been drying overnight in my damp cupboard, so they're firmer but not dry, and in the same condition. Let me tilt you down a little bit. Like I was doing with the fish, only maybe a touch drier. They're still attached to the plastic sheets. So the next thing we have to do is put them onto a board where we can actually start working on them. So this is my concrete boards. I've shown you, talked about that in the fish video. These are better than the wooden boards because they never warp, even if you leave clay on them. I actually dry my recycled clay on those boards. So you place your plastic down on top of the paper. You peel off the plastic. Remember, like in the fish video, you peel it horizontally. Then using a metal rib, you smooth it out so it's actually, you can see from this, it's actually still soft enough to smooth. Smoothing is the first step. So the next step, if you want to do, is an option. You can texture your clay so that you have something interesting on the surface to catch the glaze. This is the rubber stuff that you buy to stop your carpets slipping around, or cushions, or whatever it is you're doing. So I got this at the dollar store. You simply, carefully at first, roll it in so it's stuck, because it will fold and wrinkle too. So you're simply rolling this in. Alright, and then if you think you got it, you lift up your fabric and you get a really nice texture. Alright, so these are the walls of my birdhouse. And then you use the templates. Remember, we cut templates here. I gave you the measurements if you want to use this size, but you don't have to by a long shot. You can make smaller versions. You simply place these down and see whether you can get as many. This one doesn't need a texture, but this one does. So I can get 3 out of this. I wonder if I can get 2 of those and 1 of those. So I'd have to flip this over without moving it. No, it doesn't look like I can get, maybe that way. No, I'm going to try and just get 2 of these and 1 of these from this slab. And we always have a little bit of waste, but it's not really waste, because you can save all your little scraps to use for decorative elements on the actual piece. So you're going to cut them. There we go. So I've got 3 of my shapes that I'm going to need. Lift this up a bit closer so you can see the 3 shapes. So I need 1 more of these and 1 of this. So I'm going to do the same thing on the next slab to get my actual shapes, and then I'm going to save all the pieces because I might be able to use those in the actual decorative elements, window boxes. So very carefully take your little slabs out. So there you go, that's what I've got. So I'll move on to the next slab. The second slab is smoothed out. I'm just trying to see whether I've got enough to get 2 of this one out of this and 1 of this one. So I'm going to make a light mark, not through the clay because I still haven't to texture it yet, but so that's where this one would go. So let's see if I can get 2. Yep, this slab I can get 2 of this. This is the biggest one, so I'd like to get 2 of that. And then I'll have 3 of this one and 3 of this, and I'll need 1 more slab to get the other sides. So, so basically, texturing the same way as this is the 3rd slab. So each slab, remember, is about just under 6 pounds because it was a 22 pound block of clay divided into 4. So that means each one was 5.5 pounds. So, this is the 3rd slab, and this gives me 4 of these, 4 of these, and 2 of these out of the 3 slabs, and a little bit spare again. So just going to peel that up carefully, because I'm reusing a lot of this clay as other elements. And that one's going to be hard to get out, so I'm just going to have to dig into that one to lift it. So there we go. So this gives me enough slabs for 2 birdhouses, except for the roofs, which is next. Oh, got 1 more to go out there. This is a different texture cloth that I found at the dollar store, and it's also the same thing. It's meant for stopping carpets and upholstery from slipping around, I think. Of course, you could overdo this. Remember, we could be making this too textural, but hey, what's the heck? See if I can lift this one. It might lift the other one. There you go. And then, and I know this is too big, so I'm just going to cut it anyway. I might end up with a bit of wasted clay. Actually, I only needed 2 of these pieces by the look of this. So which is the better 2? Oh, it's got to be these 2. So I have a nice big piece to use there. So I'm going to cut this back a little bit, just just needs to be cut. There's a little divot there. This clay is pretty much waste. I think we'll just soften that one down. That may be reusable, but not really this piece, I don't think. There we go. So this will be the roof. So this will be the ridge right here. So you won't see the difference there. Both sides will be a little different though. And this piece is spare. But I need another one of these, which means I will end up with another slab. Okay, I've actually finished the big slabs, and I just cut out, identical to doing the big slabs, all these little ones. So I have lots of small rectangles. And this is, once again, it's sort of optional because you don't have to put windows that stick out from the surface of the slab. You can just cut holes in the actual clay slab itself. And just kind of be careful that you don't cut too far. So I'm simply doing all the ones in the same direction. That's a lot cleaner than the other way. Whoop. So there, the other ones you can see. I think the X-Acto knife is the better way of doing this. Right, now I've got 16 windows all cut out. I've made small little sills so the windows can have like a little sill underneath as well. And after this, it's just about research if you want to make your house really decorative. So take a look at architectural drawings of Victorian houses. Okay, I've been cutting lots of architectural little things out. Let's see if I can get you over a bit closer here. Windows, little kind of things for the corners of the peaks and such, little corner pieces. And then I just spent some time cutting small balconies to hang off where the bird goes in there, so you can have a little place to perch. But these are like, you know, just like terrace balcony type things. So there's quite a lot. They were done just by cutting the balcony things, just like I did the windows. Just basically got a strip of clay. The clay is stiffening up a bit now, so I might be able to put the bird houses together. So I simply cut through, space for a, alright, so if you actually, yep, there you go. So it's like just about, and then you bend it to actually make a balcony. Alright, so that's that part. And I've got a bunch of props from my kiln and some water bottles there, anything that's heavy that stands up so I can support this as I'm putting it together. And I've got a yogurt carton there full of water that'll be on the inside of this thing just to hold it, because I've got to support it just in case the clay is a bit soft. And then you need a piece of paper to put the first piece of clay on that you're going to assemble this. So let's see if I can get you as close as possible. This piece is the base of the actual birdhouse. Alright, so that one has to be wet on the edges, but we don't know exactly where these slabs are going to go, so I'm wetting on the inside quite a bit to build up some slip. You might be able to hear my gas kiln firing from in there, but so then that's got to sit for a second. These are my pieces that I've actually got to assemble. This is the outside of the piece, and so is that. So I'm going to see whether I can lift this off. Don't want to bend the clay too much because clay does have a bit of a memory, but I want to flip it over if I can. They feel pretty soft, but this is a real live thing that you will encounter yourself, so I'm trying to do it the way you would be encountering it. So let's actually place this now there, and then this one, I should move this over a bit, I think you just can't see all of it. Okay, there we go. So this one is a side wall, depending on whether this is the front, I guess. You can call them anything you want. Side or front or back or whatever. So let's... Alright, so those two are going to be put together. So a nice thing to do would be, using an X-Acto knife, maybe we should do this better, is to just take out, very carefully, a little triangle of clay there, because that will give you a bevel. And then, since I'm not good with my left hand, let's turn it round. Still see it? Yep. So I'm going to take another little bevel, take it down a bit more, I think. Take another little bevel. And all the pieces that are going to be assembled have to have that done. So I also have to take the bevel out of this side. So I'm just basically taking about 45-degree angle. And once again, the bottom part doesn't have to have this done, but so the roof doesn't either. Okay, the next step you have to do here is, because it's a slab and it's slightly drier, although it is still very bendable, is that you just score along the edges that are going to be joined, and then wet them, and then score them again to kind of mix in the water a little bit. Okay, so basically everything is scored and scratched, including the base piece here. This is the actual piece that will support everything. So I wet it, scored it all the way around, kind of a bigger area than I think I need. And here we go. I'm going to fit this in the middle, just to kind of hopefully support the clay a little bit on the inside. I'm leaving enough space all the way around so I can use these to put on the clay to actually support it as well, because it actually is quite floppy. Make sure this doesn't topple over the actual off the wheel head. And then I'm going to lift this piece without bending it. You can still see this just right. Once I've got this in my arms, it can be hard to move the camera. So see, it's supported, it's not flopping over my hand too much. I'm going to leave the paper back up here. It is bending though. So now let's sit this back up here. So this is a side piece. I'm just going to support it for now, because we don't know the actual position completely yet. That's not going to flop over, let's hope. It's a good idea when you do this project, and I did do this with my classes, if you've got somebody helping you. But it is possible to do it on its own. If the clays are much drier than this, you can easily do it on your own. Now let's turn this around a bit without it falling off the wheel head. Okay, so let's get another prop here. These are just kiln props that sit in my gas kiln. So now let's get this as close in there to support it as possible. And then tack it. Don't press it together too tight. Tack it, and then after you've tacked it, go along with your fingers and just pinch it all the way up. We're not going to do the bottom at this point, we're just trying to concentrate on the sides. Because the bottom, I told you, the weight will sort of attach it to that just the way it is. But basically, pinch with your fingers like that. And then you get the second piece. which I have here. See if you can get this down a bit. It's kind of a funny angle here. Maybe if I tilt it back a bit, it'll be a little further away though. Okay, we're going to do the same again without bending this too much. We're basically pulling the paper off and sit it up. It's going to bend a little bit because of how soft it is. And then we place this once again right on top of the bottom, and then tack the piece all the way up just so you can position it before you really attach it. That one just needs to be in a bit. Make sure that, since you've beveled it, you can really get the corners tight. And we can also rework the corners. And I may even attach more pieces of clay. Then put your supports, kiln supports, or I've even got some water bottles here which would be good for supporting it. And basically just trying not to bend it too much. So positioning the supports so they don't actually bend too much. Now the inside one, that's the water bottles I was talking about. I got a variety of things here that I think will be just the right size so I can stop it from wobbling around. See how I've got it? And I can take all these out easily once I've got it standing up. But once the four sides are attached, it'll be strong. And here is the last piece. So peel off the paper. This is small enough I can hold it up in the air like that. You can let these pieces of clay slabs get much drier, but they're much more likely when you're joining to crack apart again. So it's a good idea, even though it's a little floppy at this point, to do it as soft as you can cope with it. There we go. So that's the last join to do now. See how bending it is? That'll give you an idea to actually try to do this when the clay is soft but not floppy enough so it just is impossible to hold its own weight once you get these four sides joined. It is just a matter of getting them joined because it is, going to hold itself up at this point. There we go. Fingertips in water and running it up like that. Oh, I do have my sponge. There you go. Okay, so am I bluffing here when I talk about being able to remove all this lot? Water bottle out. Water pot out. Kiln supports off. And those off. So it is totally supporting itself now. What I like to do is paddle it. So you can just do that and tap it. This is a bit sticky because I just added water. But once this firms up a little bit, you're going to go around and paddle it like this. And make sure that the join areas at the top, this one, see how that's still a bit bent out. But you're just kind of paddling it, but it's a bit soft at the moment. But let me give you a look down on the inside. Is this going to fall off? Camera in pot. You can see down inside there. So it's pretty straight already. So this clay was fairly soft. It showed you, that you can actually do it when the clay is a little bit soft. So I now have to attach all the windows and doors while it's still this soft. so that it actually, you know, if I wait any longer, it would actually be so dry that you'd have to score scratch and really force them. But at this point, it is. Let me show you. It's soft. Okay, it's holding up, but it is really soft. And it's a perfect time to attach things now. Without scoring and scratching, I would just simply wet with the brush. I can actually show you one of these actually. Let's do one quickly. I was going to do this next, but you wet the back of the piece and let that sit for a bit, and wherever you're going to put it, you do the same in this general area here. I'll say this one's going to be here. And then the same again here. So you're building up slip on the surface, and I would take a little bit of time over this, because this you need to make sure, since you're not going to be putting too much sort of pressure on these, but you've got it soft enough so that you can use your hand. And like when I'm putting my handles on, you've seen me put handles on mugs, you're simply forcing the pieces together with a bit of pressure. Okay, so I'll attach the windows on this one now. Okay, the other thing that's important at the bottom part now is to go along. It was just a little bit hanging out, so I've smoothed it out by using this wooden tool. And if it was hanging out a lot, you could just cut it off. But this was almost tight, so if you use those measurements I gave you, you should end up with the same as I've got here. Right, and we can clean that up at the bottom, but that just seals that bottom area there. The inside you can do as well if you want to, just using your tool. It's kind of very hard for you to see, but I'm just going to use that tool and smooth it down on the inside of that join. Just using it, you can see a little bit on the tool there, just to kind of clean up your join area in the inside. That's all you're doing. Just pulling a little clay off and pushing it into the joint area. And the corners on the outside have sealed all the way up, but just for tidying, neatness, just pull that corner all the way up the seam. And it just cleans up your seam a little bit. So you can see the sludge that swells out as I actually pushed it together. So this, see if I can hold you above there again. I don't know if you'll see this or not, but it's actually much cleaner on the inside now. Sponge up like this. It's still on a piece of paper, so it's not stuck to the wooden board that it's sitting on. Okay, I have all the windows on, as you can see. And now I'm just going to put my little eaves, sort of decorative type eaves on here. Mine are a bit shorter and longer on one side, so you can do whatever you like, but basically make sure these go just below the roof line so they don't stick up higher, because otherwise the roof will be leaning on them. I'm not sure about the structural weight that this little piece of clay can hold. It's supposed to be just a little decorative eave thing, and they're kind of so forcing behind and in front to really make that join on. I can actually just kind of smooth it a little bit, but there's plenty of time for smoothing later on. But you can just kind of clean it up if you want to. Most of the cleaning up I think should be done at the end, because the clay is nice and soft. You can actually join things at this point without basically much at all. Now here is, this is the one thing that I'm not sure if you will have, but you can make it. I get these in packing materials. When I have something shipped to me, they often have these triangles at the corner of the box to strengthen the box. But you could make these just with pieces of cardboard, use duct tape or something at the top here to hold them together, and duct tape the inside so it will definitely be kind of strong. You then very carefully place this on top of your roof line, like that. I'm not sure how the camera does it. So it's a nice sort of 45-degree angle there, all right? Okay, here is my roof, that big square, all right? So I'm going to place this very carefully on top of the wood thing and let it bend slowly. Don't force it quickly because it will crack at the seam. And then basically test it. It's about the right distance. This could be moved backwards and forwards, of course. And then wet it right at the seam at the top. We need to strengthen that seam right at the top there, because that's the part we just bent it at a pretty severe angle, and I always worry that that would actually crack. A thin strip, this clay is much softer, and attach it right to the top here. I just wet it, really. You saw me with the brush, I wet the whole thing. I'm going to do this with my X-Acto knife all the way along. And then the same on the other side. See if you can see a bit better. So basically just giving that appearance of tile. See the little elbow right in the corner there on both sides? They should be touching the actual, that one's a little bit short, so I don't think it matters though, as long as it's not too high. But there you've got those little supports holding that roof. Is I have these little balconies, which is a total option, you don't have to do, but make sure that they're not drying too much. So I'm going to wet this one a little bit. Just wet it so that you don't crack that when you actually bend it. This one is a little softer because it was on the inside a bit. And the bird hole is going to be cut eventually for the bird to get in inside one of these windows here, and it will be cut on the other side over here at the bottom, so there'll be two nests inside here. And then I use a piece of wood which I cut later on as a square to separate the two levels. But the balcony will just go, you know, somewhere in that area there. So I've got another one down here to do. Basically the two areas that we're going to be joined, I'm just going to score a touch. Just to give them a little extra tooth. I brushed water down here and scratched it a little bit just there and there. So now it's just a matter of, I'm going to support it with something of the right height there. Could even use this just at the front just to kind of hold it. And then the same as I've joined the windows, you move it up and down, side to side a little bit over the scored area until you feel like it's actually attached. And then you do the same on the other side until you feel it's attached. You can use a wooden modeling tool to simply press and do the same thing with this. Now this is optional stuff. This is just not essential for the bird. You can just drill a hole and stick a stick in there, and that will give the bird somewhere to stand on. Down just a touch, making sure this doesn't collapse. And I think that's just about okay. I don't usually do this until it's a bit drier, but this is a 1-inch drill, and I don't use a drill to do this. But basically, the bird for a finch, It's supposed to be 7/8 of an inch, and this is an inch, and so by the time the whole thing is fired, it'll be less than 7/8 of an inch. So I use this just as a guide and then cut it a bit bigger, but I simply place it where I want it to be and just push it in, wiggle it, pull it out, and the dots of the teeth on this thing show me where I've got to cut the hole. So I'm going to go slightly bigger than the actual teeth and cut round a circle. This can be made even bigger afterwards, of course. When it's drier, you can actually, there you go. So there's the hole for the bottom one, and the same up here. Yeah, each bird takes a different size hole apparently. More of it off the actual hole, and then just kind of soften this a little bit at the edges so the bird doesn't find it too sharp. Same on the inside. And down there. Okay, so that's about it. I'll put the roof back on, out. So I'm just going to eyeball it. You can feel when it sits level. Take a look underneath. That looks pretty good on that side. No, it's just a bit off on this side, so I can pull this over a touch. So you can feel the roof is just overlapping the wall on this side, so it'll sink down lower, and on this side it's a bit further out. So I probably could have been a bit more even about putting the length on, but it works just fine anyway. And then you just let this dry carefully now. Okay, this is the following day, and I've let these birdhouses dry out overnight. Just firm up, I should say, not dry out. But the next step is I have to get the roof drilled for holes for the actual hanging device, and I also need to take the cardboard out of here before it dries too much, because it might force it to crack a little bit. Here's one that I have hanging outside. This one basically it's covered in dirt, but basically that's how they hang. So basically it's clothesline, which is very strong, and I have 2 holes drilled in the peak and then 2 holes drilled in the roof. But that's how they hang up outside. Lifted carefully. There's paper underneath here, remember, so it will slide down. Let's get you lowered down a bit at this point. So I can put this on the table without bending them at all, because it will crack very easily at this point. The actual peak is easy to drill. I'm just straightening it now because it's still soft enough, just in case it actually, not too much bending, because it's still bendable, but it's actually firmed up quite a bit, so we don't want to crack it. There's any stress of bending at this point. This one was pretty straight. This one had a little lean to it, so I'm just straightening up just a touch, and hopefully that will stay upwards. But then you just need to drill. You can use a knife. I mean, this is overkill to drill with this. Is this sturdy? Yep. Drill a little hole there. And a little hole there. And then this is tricky. You just take that out. It's easy to lift that out. Take your paper without letting it. I'm not sure if you could hear that. My cat just scampered around. Now, I suppose I could do this is when it's on the piece. I've got to get this now back on here without the actual thing from bending at all. So I'm going to lift it, and I'm basically trying to not let it Here's my cat running around. There we go, just trying to position it so that it's flush. It doesn't have to be totally flush, of course. These things are still loose. There you go, I've got it back on here now. So I know that that's the wall, so I'm going to drill just about there. That was perfect. So I'm going to put that underneath there again. Measure that, put that to there, so that's the wall. So I've got to come to about here. Just wants to move around. There we go. So now I've got a hole right there that the cable will go through. So it goes around, it goes in here, underneath the roof ridge, and then up through this one, and then you just get a clip at the top which you hold them, and those are the clips that you use for washing lines, so they're very strong. And this is done. Anyway, there's the little hole so the bird can get in. So basically the hole has to be about 1/4 inch, I would say, bigger at this point than it should be at the finish, because it's 7/8 of an inch, should be probably 1/8 of an inch at this point. So when it's shrunk, it'll be 7/8 of an inch. And the hole in the bottom underneath is really just, if you put a hole in the bottom, I recommend you do. That way it will be the right size, and just to let rain out if rain gets in, which is highly unlikely. This roof is quite large. So and then you can do down the edge here if you want to. You could define, I've got this smudged line all the way down, which is where we joined it, which I think is just fine the way it is. But if you wanted to define it, you could take a trimming tool and simply put it in there and take a piece out to kind of define that edge. And you can. All right. So just working on details for a while at this point. When I have something that's really fragile like this, that's thin, like it's something that's really big, I usually cover it with plastic so it doesn't dry out, and try and swish out all the air as well. So the moisture from here will just seep into there a little bit and stop that little fragile piece from drying out too fast, because if it does, it'll be so dry that it is not going to. I just painted it a little bit with water, so it's got a little moisture, extra moisture in there, and basically it won't dry out fast. It would just crack. I mean, basically it's so thin versus the bulk of the rest that it will just crack. So protect it by just like that. And I do that to other handles I put on platters and things like that as well. I've defined the edge of this a little bit with the trimming tool, so we've squared it down a little bit so it's a bit nicer. And there's just an immense amount of detail you could still go into with these to actually make them better. But at this point it's actually pretty good. It's a lot better than the one I showed you that I made before. And the only thing that extra has to be done, and I don't do it out of clay, I usually find a block of wood. I just get a piece of wood and cut it so that I have to sometimes cut it a couple of times, just so it sits in there, and it'll be the right size exactly so that it'll just wedge in there, and it can't fall either way. And I can show you that later, I guess, as well. But that's it. That is a birdhouse. So it's what they look like afterwards, and you can make them any color, of course. So and I'll probably I don't know, the roof of it doesn't really need to have a glaze on it, but I glaze the bottom and I glaze the top of this, but I think I will, you know, I'll decide later. But anyway, but that's what they look like when they're hanging up. You know, they just hang in a tree. So how about this? A cardboard box. Basically, just put your box together and then put the roof over the top. Remembering as it firms up a little bit, you need to take it off here, because otherwise it will actually crack. But you know, and this is how you get your form for the rooftop. All right, so just brainstorming. Potter's tips at the end of the video. If you've got some spare clay left over, which I do, you can make, let's get this set up a little bit. You can make some little less than 5-minute trays, basically from what slabs you have left. This is left over from the roof that I just made. Piece of styrofoam, beveled obviously, any shape you want with these. You simply place your clay over the top. Try and get it in the middle if you want to make a very even one. But they're so random, these. And then you simply find yourself a nice paddling stick, and very carefully spend about a minute rotating it, paddling down a little bit at a time. And you can do this a little or a lot, because you don't have to make it form the actual shape of the mold. It's quite often just nice to have a bunch of these little trays if you're having dinner with people. In the old days, we used to have dinner with people. There you go. It'll be back to normal. This has all happened 120 years ago, and then we had 120 years of normal life. So, okay, so we got a nice shape. Didn't even take a minute. You take your mold out. It should just lift right out. The texture's on the inside, and then you basically just brush it to clean up your edges. This one needs to be cut a little bit, I think. So I'll simply use a knife and cut the edges a bit smoother, because this one was a nicer piece of clay. But it'll give you a nice little dish. Put some ice cream in it or whatever you want to do. All right. But that's how to use up all those scraps of clay. Okay. All right. Just a quick tip. There you go. Scrap clay all used up. 4 little dishes. You know, even if I don't want to sell them, I can use them as glaze tests or something. But basically it took less than probably 2 minutes for each one with scrap clay. All right.